Hello and welcome. In this report, we'll be going over China and all the things you need to know for moving your business into China and dealing in China. The first thing to look at, of course, is the people in China. Generally, the Chinese people are a very collectivist society, holding the good of the group over the good of the individual. What this means for a corporation or a company is that you want to get involved with as many people as possible to build relations and become a part of the society of the collective that the Chinese people see themselves in. The next thing to look at is the Chinese people are very long-term oriented. They're not, and with this, they have a lot more self-restraint. They're not the kind to go out and buy impulse items that you might see a lot of Americans buying, but instead work really hard to promote their long-term wealth and the long-term well-being and their children's long-term well-being instead. Again, what this means is that items that are typically seen as impulse buys will not do as well in China because people do not have the same tendencies to buy these impulse items. Instead, going for items that will work well and improve them in the long run will do much better. The next thing I want to mention, and I mention this here because it's important when dealing with anyone in China, and not just in business settings, is the importance of oil contracts. When you give your word for something in China, that is your word. It is more important than any written document. Writing things down in contracts in China is something that you will do, of course, but it's seen almost entirely as a formality. The agreement you agree on orally is much more important. So if you say something in China that is a promise to do something, then you need to make sure you're committed to it and that you're going to do it. Because if you don't do it, you will damage your reputation in the area and with the receiver of the promise or guarantee. So looking at the government real fast, it is a one-party system. It's a communist system, as you all know, and the current president is President Xi Jinping. The Chinese government is split up into three branches, much like the United States one. It's got an executive, a legislative, and a judicial branch. There are problems with all of them, and there is corruption in the system. However, there's been work towards lowering the corruption as much as possible. The most important thing to remember with this is that President Xi Jinping was reelected in October of 2017 last year for a second term. Chinese presidents typically only serve for 2 5-year terms, meaning in 2022, he is likely to not be reelected and that someone else will come into power. And Chinese elections are always, even during times when the president doesn't change, times where a great amount of change does happen within the government. So while this isn't immediately relevant, it's important to keep your eye on the election as it continues to draw nearer and to make sure you keep on top of that so you can know what to expect as the government changes. So when negotiating in China with other businesses, important things to remember is to not reveal any deadlines or time restraints. If the Chinese people know that you have a deadline for coming up with a deal, they'll use that against you more often than you'll be able to use that against them. It comes down to them being very long-term oriented. They are not even at the time of the deal, they will not look for the immediate gratification or the immediate deal they can get. They will try and push you to the very last moment for it in order to get a better deal for themselves and to put you under pressure for the deadline. So you don't want to reveal that. The next thing to do is to use a team to negotiate rather than an individual. Teams of people work better in China because it's a collectivist society. They see a group of people coming to negotiate for something better than the individual because it shows that an entire group of people, you're working for the entire benefit of the group and the corporation. If it's just an individual going to negotiate for something, they may see that as the individual working for their own benefit instead of the benefit of the company. Kind of when there's a group of people, they're keeping each other in check, honestly, for not greed, maybe. The next thing to remember is to have an interpreter that can be trusted. This seems very basic, but it's also very important. Miscommunication is one of the most important things to want to avoid in making business deals. Because if there's miscommunication, then there can be a breakdown for no reason, no one's fault, just a misunderstanding of what was meant. So if you have an interpreter that can't be trusted or doesn't know the language quite as well as maybe he or she should, then it can damage your business. And it can damage your business because it will damage your relationship with the person you're trying to make a deal with, which then in turn comes to the social community-based system they have, where your standing in the community will be dropped as you offend members in it. The last thing to remember is to, again, with this, keep a strong relationship and respect towards all the people involved. Again, it's a community that you're working with, and that they're working for the benefit of the community and the group rather than just the individual. So keeping good relations with them is very, very important. Cannot be understated. So looking now at the economic facts, it will look first at the USD to renminbi, or Chinese yuan, over the last 5 years. As you can see on the graph, it's hovered from between $6 for, or 6 yuan for $1 to 7 yuan for $1. This is very standard deviation. It's nothing to be concerned about at all. And this happens partly because the Chinese government keeps it within that range. The Chinese currency, however, in a global sense, is rising. The Chinese currency is getting more powerful by the year, even though the ratio from renminbi to USD has not changed very much. So looking at the economy as a whole with this also is that their GDP growth is about 6%. This is significantly higher than most other nations. In America, it hovers between 2 to 3%. This GDP growth is considered exceptional from China, and a lot of people have been predicting that it will fall for years now. However, it never has. So at this point, at this point, the predictions show that it'll probably not decrease to 2 to 3% until about 2050. So China has a very high GDP growth, and its rate of inflation is 2%, which is a very normal amount. America too has a smaller inflation rate. No, I'm thinking interest rate. Sorry, my bad. The rate of inflation is very normal. So if you think about it this way, Chinese currency is worth 2% less each year from inflation, but worth 6%. But the people are getting 6% richer every year from GDP growth, meaning that in China, the people are getting richer faster than their money is losing value, which generally means that it's a good place to do business. The interest rate in China currently is about 4.4%. And as you can see on the graph, it's been on a downward trend. This is a good thing. Okay, it's a good thing for investments, especially with the Chinese people being such long-term oriented. They have much more savings and so better interest rates are better for the Chinese people. Looking at the Chinese government economy interacting with others, we can see that China has free trade agreements with all of the ASEAN nations, which is the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. This association includes Thailand, it includes Vietnam, it includes Indonesia, it includes Australia and New Zealand. And this organization, they have free trade barriers for the exchangement of goods between those nations, meaning that when we move into China, we'll be competing with people in those markets in China too, and they'll have much more favorable positions. China, unfortunately, does not have any free trade deals with the United States. And the other thing, so we can't get any breaks on them like the ASEAN nations can. The other thing to know about tariffs is that the tariff on food is very high. Selling food in China is not a good idea. It is highly recommended that you avoid selling food in China. The other thing to remember is that for foreign companies coming in, there's a lot of red tape that you'll have to go around. And there's not anything really to be done about it other than to be looking at it objectively and to see what you can do to work with it. But it's important to know that there will be a lot of red tape. So from here, we'll begin to look at our products. The first of our products being Invisalign. Invisalign is a retainer system that is a retainer, for orthodontic production. So with Invisalign, one of the main reasons for wanting to promote this is it works with the long-term goals of families to improve their health in the long run, and secondly is there's a shortage of orthodontists in China. Currently, right now, there's only about 700 orthodontists in all of China, which need to cover for 1.4 billion people. This is a very big shortage, meaning that the demand for orthodontists is very high. And again, the demand is very high. So we can advertise, so what this means is we can advertise this as a family thing where parents will see this and they'll be like, oh man, I want my children to have straight teeth and better living style with this. So they'll come and they'll buy it and work with it. We advertise it as improving their self-image, improving self-confidence, and people following parental advice. The children who use this and the parents who use this, it will improve them in the long run, which is a good thing in China again. The next thing we'll be looking at is our subscription health services. This primarily focuses on air filters and water filters because there is a huge need for that. As we all know, Beijing has a somewhat stereotypical smog that covers it a lot of the time with air pollution. If you've seen pictures of people in China, a lot of times they are wearing medical masks in order to try and deal with some of the smoke. But in houses, you, of course, don't want to wear those. So air filtration systems are already a prominent business in China. However, currently they're usually sold as parts or as systems rather than as a program to replace them every month or whatever. So this is meant to be a subscription service that will every month the people will sign a subscription with us and pay monthly, and then each month we'll come in and we'll replace the air filters or water filters or whatever they pay for. And we can sell car filtration systems and all that. And it will be convenient for the families because right now in China, a lot of families will buy filtration systems, but then they'll never replace the air filters, and essentially their filtration systems won't be working even when they're turned on. The other idea with this is to move a little bit into health and general wellness too, with things such as health club memberships and online doctor visits. This again works with the Chinese people wanting to promote their families and their long-term goals of staying healthy and alive. So the goal with this is to provide a monthly service that will continue to bring in income as people find it more and more convenient. I mentioned before that there's a market for filtration systems and filter replacements on their own, but there's only one other company that sells a subscription service like ours. So our service will be a unique thing that will be able to take off in China due to its uniqueness and due to its necessity. Again, the Chinese people, this is seen as a necessity for a lot of people in China, especially where the smog is most prominent. The last thing we consider selling is pharmaceutical drugs. This is a more broader topic than the other two, because drugs are very expensive and it can be very difficult to just manufacture a drug out of nowhere. This is the industry that'll have the highest starting cost for it, but if we continue to work by United States standards, they'll be able to meet the Chinese standards, because Chinese standards for medicine and drugs is less than the United States standards. The clinical tests and things in the United States are enough. So even if we did just want to use currently existing pharmaceutical drugs, we could do that. But also if we wanted to create our own drugs, that would work too. Currently, China, these kinds of products in China with medicine are actually among the lowest tariffs in China, because the medical field in China has fallen behind of a lot of other first world countries due to a number of reasons. So we'll be able to get a good deal through tariffs and taxes that way, although there may be higher startup costs. In China right now, there's an aging population and people are getting sicker and sicker because of the smog and the smoke that covers the city. So people are in need of medicine more often. So this, again, has a very high need. And so with that, we will end the presentation. These are the list of our sources we can do. I hope you have a great day and manage to learn from the presentation. Thank you for listening.